You are tuned to CFTO TV Channel 9 in Toronto, Cable 8.
The CTV National News with Richard Brown.
Good evening. The whole world was watching today as the superpowers started talking again about arms control. It's the first time the Soviets and the Americans have done that in 13 months. Both sides cautioned that their 2 days of meetings would amount to little more than talks about future talks. They said no arms breakthrough was likely. The Soviets are especially upset about President Reagan's so-called Star Wars strategy. It's a plan to develop a system to shoot down Russian missiles in outer space. The Americans say they won't drop the Star Wars scheme. We have more from Mark Phillips in Geneva.
A day of long meetings began as the American cavalcade carrying George Shultz pulled into the Soviet mission here this morning. For the first time in more than a year, the Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko and the United States Secretary of State sat down to talk about the full range of arms control issues. If the length of the sessions is any indication that the long list of Soviet-American grievances is getting a thorough airing, then the negotiators seem to be making up for lost time. The morning session went on for an hour longer than scheduled. And when the Soviets arrived at the U.S. mission for the afternoon session, it was for another marathon encounter lasting another 3.5 hours. By the time the parties took some time at an American reception to relax, they had sat across the table for 7 hours.
We are in prison.
There may have been some good-natured chatter at the social gathering, but there was little information from either side as to whether any progress was being made. Options being discussed, according to diplomatic observers, include a possible follow-up meeting by officials or even a visit to Moscow in a few months by Shultz. Any official word on whether this first session in so long was useful will have to wait at least until tomorrow. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Geneva.
Dr. Henry Morgentaler reopened his Toronto abortion clinic today as he promised he would. He pleaded with police in front of the clinic not to disrupt medical procedures there. This came as Morgentaler prepared to go back to court Thursday to face a second Ontario charge of conspiring to procure a miscarriage. Bodine Williams reports.
This is the third time the Toronto abortion clinic has opened, but the first time abortions have been performed by Morgentaler himself. And the clinic has beefed up security because of this and increased threats. Morgentaler says he performed 11 abortions on the first day. Outside, supporters of the Right to Life organization continued to demonstrate. There was no trouble, even with one pro-Morgentaler supporter nearby. Later, Morgentaler held a news conference to announce that he and his supporters are launching a new offensive called Enough is Enough. They want the picketers to stop and the abortion controversy to cool down before there is violence.
Well, I am concerned about my safety, I am concerned about the safety of the staff, and I'm concerned about the safety of the patients. As you know, in the United States, there has been a rash of about 25 bombings against abortion clinics. I do hope that Canada will not follow the example of this kind of violence.
But the anti-abortionists vow to continue to demonstrate outside the clinic until police shut the clinic. And Laura MacArthur says Morgentaler's presence in Toronto will not cool things down.
The issue is heating up. It's always been a very hard issue, but it's heating up. People are getting very impatient with this Morgentaler man.
Morgentaler says he is not defying the law because he has been acquitted by an Ontario jury, and that he doesn't expect Toronto police to charge him once again. Bodine Williams, CTV News, Toronto.
The jury was selected today in the trial of Corporal Denis Lortie. The 25-year-old Canadian Forces supply clerk was charged after a shooting spree in the Quebec legislature last May. Alan Fryer reports.
Denis Lortie was in remarkably good spirits. As he sat in the prisoner's dock, he smiled and chatted with his guards, then in a clear voice pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. His lawyers say they'll be using a defense of insanity. The charges arise from a shooting spree last May. Canadians had never seen anything like it. Quebec's National Assembly under siege. A lone gunman in full battle fatigues entered the legislature, firing from an automatic weapon. It was 5 hours before a suspect finally gave himself up, and in the end, 3 people were dead, 13 others injured. For 2 of those 5 hours, the gunman was holed up in the Blue Room, the main legislative chamber. What went on in that room was apparently captured on videotape by the parliamentary cameras. So far, Lortie's lawyers haven't been able to see that videotape. They've told the judge they want to because it's central to their defense. In the morning, the prosecution will outline its case against Lortie and begin calling witnesses. With up to 85 people expected to testify, the trial could last a month. Alan Fryer, CTV News, Quebec City.
There was a scuffle outside a Toronto courtroom today as a man arrived for his trial on charges of distributing hate literature. 4 men were arrested for causing a disturbance and public mischief. Ernst Zundel was wearing his usual blue construction helmet when he arrived. He was surrounded by supporters wearing yellow helmets. Zundel is a German citizen who operates a publishing company. In preliminary arguments today, his lawyer claimed freedom of